Hello and welcome back to Cinema 130. This week's lesson, we are in week 6, is lighting. Lighting is a part of cinematography and is conducted by a separate crew. And this week we're going to examine it. So let's get into it. All right, I'll share my screen. Hopefully you've got your book open and you're ready to move on. Also, of course, we have our cinematography homework there. So here we go. All right, filmmaking. Lighting. Here we go. So lighting gives film its look. It's what makes a film look like the time period it's supposed to be in. And here we see that example with the lighthouse. It looks like an old silver print photograph. Lighting makes the shot. In this example, we see the backlighting of the two romantic figures really creating the scene, making the strafes on the ground and so forth. Lighting transforms the shot. Take a look at this example from Citizen Kane, where really the lighting is the interesting part in the shot and the figures that block it, creating the silhouette, creating contrast. We say every frame a painting. And what we mean by that is that when the cinematographer is doing the lighting, he's painting with light. And he's trying to make every image, every frame look perfect, look good. This is why we do a single camera shoot, so that the lighting is composed, the shadows are composed for that one camera to make the best possible, the best looking image you can. So here's an example from The Godfather. And what we see here is the lights falling on the subject's face. And in the background, out of focus, we have these other lights. The rest of the room falls into darkness because it's not giving us information that we need. All the information, the focus is right here, okay? And this is how lighting sculpts figures from the darkness. So lights are necessary in filmmaking because film and digital cameras do not respond to light the same way that your eyes do, okay? So when you walk into a dark room, it's very easy for you to make out objects, but that's why when you walk on a film set, you'll see a lot more light than you think is necessary, a lot more than someone would have in their home, because it has to be brighter for the camera, even digital cameras. So there's a lot more to cinematography than simply making actors visible and photographing them. You just don't come in, set up the camera and start shooting. For the best results, the mood of the film must be carefully crafted with lighting. We say every frame is a painting. Each shot is carefully lit for aesthetic beauty to enhance the mood and advance the narrative. Now, the person in charge of all this is the cinematographer. So that's right. He or she is in charge of the camera, lenses, camera movement, so on and so forth, framing the shot, but also creating the lighting. Because remember, they're photographing the picture. So they're going to paint the picture with light before they photograph it. So we have the cinematographer, the DP lights the set. The gaffer is his #1 assistant. He is the head of the electrician crew, and they set up the lighting according to the DP's wishes. Then you have a crew called the grips, and the grips do things like set up the dolly track for the camera, and they're in charge of all the rigging, and they also set up the shadows, and you'll see what that means in a moment. Most of the time spent on set is spent on lighting. That's right. The cast comes in, the director blocks the scene, shows the cinematographer what needs to be lit. They do a few tests. The cast and the director go away, maybe to rehearse. And then the lighting crew comes in and lights the scene. Cast comes back in, they check it, they tweak, roll camera. And the crew that's involved, the grips and electrics, are doing everything to create light, to create shadow, to block certain things, to make it look the way the DP wants it to look inside the frame. So here from Moulin Rouge, we see lighting being very effective. Here's a totally different look. In the first shot, she's very glamorous and exciting. In the second shot, much more warm and romantic. And in the third shot, much more duplicitous, much more divided by the light. We call this split lighting. So lighting conveys character. It tells us about the person that's being lit. Warm and sincere for the second shot, playing a double game for the third. Here's a shot from American Beauty. So we say that Lighting, of course, creates shadow, but DPs paint with shadow as much as they do light. Okay, so they're being conscious of where the light's falling and where the shadow's falling. And we can see from this example in American Beauty, as the boss comes out to discover his employee outside smoking, the shadows play a very strong role in making this a much more interesting image. Take another look. Okay, so here's this scene is all made by the lighting. We have a single source coming in from outside, banging in through the window, creating these strafing marks on the room as Colonel Fitz from American Beauty is wrestling with his internal demons. The lighting conveys what's going on. He looks like he's in jail by the bars. So we covered generally, let's get into specifics. We have what we call lighting schemes. That's just like a plan for lighting, a look that the DP is going for. The basic ones are Hollywood three-point lighting, high key lighting, low key lighting used in most films, star lighting, high contrast lighting, and backlighting. In addition, we'll address studio versus location lighting. In other words, going into the soundstage versus being outside in a real location. So first, Hollywood three-point lighting. Okay, here's our first example. So in this shot, Leo is being lit primarily by this light right here. This would be the key light. There's another light coming in from the side, filling in the shadow so that these shadows aren't so deep. That's called the fill light. And there's a third light. This is the key one, called the backlight or the rim light, that's providing this brightness here. And what this does is it cuts the subject out from the photo. So we don't just light someone so they can be seen, we light them so that their image looks fantastic on the screen. So one of the number one jobs of the DP is to make an interesting, beautiful image, every frame a painting. So here we see the setup kind of more clearly. We have the key light, which is the brightest. Notice it's at a 45-degree angle to the camera. That's here, could be on the left or right, doesn't matter. And then the fill light's on the opposite side. It's a lesser intensity. It's filling in the shadows created by the key light. The key light's the first light, the most important. The fill light fills in, and the backlight lights up and creates that background separation. Here it is from the top view. You can see what I'm talking about. Here it is again, and just a flat portrayal here: key light, fill light, backlight. Backlight sometimes called the hair light or the rim light, and you can move it anywhere, and it can be a bunch of different brightnesses. Sometimes it's a subtle, sometimes it's very bright. Here again from Transformers. So we have the key light is here, fill light's kind of off to the side, and it's got a yellow gel on it. And then the backlight is coming here and just creating this little rim. Without this light, the photograph is less interesting, and he's less pulled out from the background, of which he is a similar tone. Here's the three lights used, separated out: key light, fill light, rim light. Each one alone is not interesting enough. I guess you could maybe use this one, but it creates harsh shadows on the face that the fill light fills in. When we combine them, key light, fill light, rim light, what we get is the best looking effect that we want. A rim light barely does any work, but combined with the others, it fills in a little bit and makes a more interesting image. Here we see from Terminator, we have a key light doing most of the work here. We have a fill light gelled in blue coming in on the side. And then we have a rim light that cuts her out and just gives us this little hot flare right here. And that makes for an interesting dynamic image. Look at that. Over the course of her face, there's darkness, medium tones, and brightness. And we can still see her eyes. We can still see all the emotion. But what we've made is a really interesting image for the audience to look at while she's talking. So the angle of the light, the positioning of the light is going to make a difference to how the image comes out. Okay, so in this example, we have bottom lighting, straight on, sort of flat lighting, and then we have a lighting from above. And each time her face looks different. I mean, this is maybe the most romantic or attractive version we might use for a romantic scene. Here, she looks much more ominous, much meaner, and maybe we'd use this for an argument, or if she was the villain. So the direction of the light makes a difference. And you'll notice this, of course, in your own photographs. So we have light from above, which is pretty typical. The sun's above. Most lighting units in a home are above. Sometimes you have light just from the side to create that split lighting look, make a person look a little duplicitous, separating their face into light and dark. We don't see a lot of bottom lighting because it's not flattering to the face. It creates odd shadows and it's not terribly natural, but it does have its uses. So the direction of the light will greatly affect the way the image looks. Here's more examples. Same figure, same shot, different lighting. The lighting affects the character, makes this person look very different depending on the effect that you want to generate. Is he scary or is he a nerd? The lighting can kind of determine that. Here's underlighting versus top lighting. Again, not so flattering to the face, but it can be useful, particularly in horror. This is from Frankenstein, and very effective for creating a monster look, the underlighting. Top lighting is used by some artists. This is Quentin Tarantino in a few of his films. This is Marlene Dietrich. She wasn't in a Quentin Tarantino film. Pulp Fiction, you can clearly see the lighting's coming from above. Television does a lot of top lighting. We see the light hitting his hat, but notice his face is also lit. Now that's not coming from that light. They put some other light so that we can make sure we can see the actor. That's another job of the DP. Sure, you want to paint a beautiful image, a somewhat realistic image, but we still got to be able to see the cast. So we're going to put a light on his face there underneath his hat. So flat lighting is when the light is directly above or right next to the camera, and it creates kind of a flat look. A lot of your photographs that you might take with your cell phone, because the flash is right next to the lens, creates this flat look. Not the best look, and we don't see this a lot in film because it's generally unflattering. Lighting is angled to match the subject. Here you see the orange light coming in on one side, the blue light coming in on the other. This is a murderous robot in Terminator 2, so the color and the look really match the character. That's another thing DPs do, is the lighting matches the character, or it matches the star. In old Hollywood, we saw a lot of glamour lighting or star lighting, particularly for female stars, that really made them look as beautiful as possible. But in the modern day, we see it less. But here we see an example, a very subtle example of star lighting, where in this shot, clearly Superman is better lit than any other figure. And the ones in the back just start to fall off into gray. They're not important. The shot is Superman getting arrested. Notice how the light is beaming off even a dark costume. Okay, so the DP also wants to guide your eye. He's going to light most brightly, usually the thing that he wants you to be paying attention to in the shot. So moving on, we have high key versus low key. High key is very bright, few shadows. The entire set is evenly lit. We see an example here with Marilyn Monroe in a musical where the whole stage is going to be used. And then we have low key lighting, which is much darker and has many more shadows. And the example I chose is from Fight Club. It's a dramatic lighting of the subject where there's only two lights. This one here, presumably coming from this light. And then we have a cut coming in from the back, a backlight, only two lights, filling in and just making the image a little more interesting, but also sinister. So most Hollywood movies will use this type of low key lighting. High key lighting you will see in comedies, musicals, TV sitcoms use high key lighting, sometimes documentaries because they want everything to be lit. Okay. Dramas, dramatic movies, dramatic TV, Dexter, Breaking Bad, Euphoria will all use low key lighting, particularly with single camera shoots. Crime, war, horror will use low key lighting, or even just real dramatic high contrast lighting. So here we see examples. TV sitcoms will be bright, evenly lit. The old movies in particular. And this was easy and helpful because it covers the whole set. If actors are moving or dancing around, then it's easy for them to be lit. We don't have to light every single spot. And this is fine when you're shooting in that style. We see high key lighting used in Quentin Tarantino's Django. Here you can see all the actors, even the background, even underneath their faces. There's not a lot of shadow here that the DP is playing with. That's an intentional use. Sometimes you want that because you want to be able to see the costumes and the makeup. Here, there's a lot of important details to this period piece that are helped by more bright lighting. Okay. Bright lighting gives detail, less moody. Now let's move on to the moody lighting. So we have low key lighting. And here we see an example from TV. This is Dexter. From a movie, notice that the background and the gun are out of focus and dimly lit. The face is the best lighting that we see. Probably have 3-point lighting. We have a main light, and then we have another cut light coming in. And it throws all of our attention to his face, which, by the way, is on the thirds. Low-key lighting is used in a lot of movies, grayer, darker, more shadow. Here from Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind, look at the color. The room is blue. Well, guess what? In this scene, the character is depressed in this movie. Look outside, it's winter. The sky, the room seems blue and depressing. So the DP is photographing the image in a way so we can see the actors, understand the dialogue, but also it conveys the mood of the scene and the mood of the character. We see low-key lighting in a lot of historical crime films. Sometimes with low-key lighting, you'll just do 2 lights. Here we see the example where we have a bright sort of fill box here, very soft light coming from one side, and we have a simple spotlight highlighting the back of her hair, which we see in the photographs. So often low-key lighting is just done with 2 lights so that some of the shadow, or some of the face rather, falls into shadow. The master of low-key lighting was, of course, D.P. Gordon Willis, the director of photography for The Godfather, came to be known as the Prince of Darkness for scenes like this. Well, now usually in a Hollywood film, we would want to see the actor's eyes. That's where their emotion is conveyed. But in this film, he's allowed the Godfather's eyes to fall into darkness. All the lighting's coming from above, okay? Some here in the back as well. And it makes the image kind of dark. But this guy's an underworld mob figure. So his eyes not being seen, that's a good thing. That works thematically. Here we see an example of high contrast lighting from Touch of Evil. This is Orson Welles. It's really only one light banging through these blinds, creates this high contrast between dark and light here. And it really makes the shot more interesting. Otherwise, it's kind of boring. There's not a lot of information besides the gun. Here we see high contrast lighting. We have a single source, sometimes called a practical. When we can see it in the shot, it's working, it's called a practical. It's lighting all their faces. Everything else is falling into darkness. This is a crime scene. They're planning a heist, as you can see on the table from the killing. The lighting is perfect for the scene as the plotters plot their theft. Split lighting divides the face, as we've mentioned before. Very good for when characters are being evil or you want to create some mystery. Split lighting divides the face between light and dark, convey mystery, conflict, drama. Here we have kind of an example of split lighting, but we have one bright light here on the front and a fill light on the side, no real backlight or a very subtle one. And this is really working for us to create his character. Notice how the DP has lit his face. So DPs light scenes, they light the mood, they want to be able to convey information clearly, but they also light the face of the actor. They're looking at the individual face to make it look more beautiful, or in this case, more sinister. Here's an example, backlighting. This is from Clockwork Orange, and we see the characters are assaulting this man, just lit by one light, very ominous, gelled blue, makes for a fantastic look with a really simple lighting scheme. Backlighting is very effective. Here we see high contrast, no light on this character's face. It's coming towards us, makes it more ominous. Notice they've also added fog or mist into the background. And when this is done deliberately with a machine, and what it causes it to do is the light lights up the fog. It bounces off all the water particles and creates this mysterious look that you see here. Very effective backlighting. Also, sometimes we light the background. Here you can see this room has been smoked up. Sometimes these are called God rays. And this isn't natural. They created this by essentially putting dust or mist into the air. We want our backgrounds, we want the set to look interesting, and sometimes lighting can do that. Here you see lighting used to light the background. So even though these characters here in the back fall off out of focus, they're not important to the plot. The important ones are right here in focus and brightly lit. We can still see the room because he wants to give us subtle details of what's going on in the background. This is from the Grand Budapest Hotel, the film you'll be watching for your next case study. Background lighting, here's an example. Looks like we got some sunlight coming into the classroom, and you might think that that's real sunlight, but in actuality, boom, it's rays of light created on set. So notice what's going on here. This is good. Here's the light creating that strafe, okay? These are flags that are used to block where they don't want the light to go. Okay, so they're shaping with light. They've got a light, but they've also got essentially shadow makers here that put the light where they want it to be and not where they don't want it to be. Makes for a more interesting shot. We'll explain that further in a moment. So studio versus location shooting. So if you're shooting in a studio, you're shooting on a sound stage, and there are these large, empty, soundproof warehouses where sets can be built, lit, and filmed. The key thing is that they can come back to them 24/7. They're soundproof. There's no light getting in, so they're dark. All light is artificial. They have power, equipment. It's the best place to shoot. On location, though, is what looks great. And these are the real locations that get movies their fantastic look. And so you have to go out in the world, you have to rent them, you have to control the area, bring all the equipment. Let's take a look. So studio sound stages, here's from the outside and from the inside. There's these giant rooms, huge high ceilings, lots of power, lots of room to build anything. And of course, look at how thick the doors are. They're soundproof. So someone else could be shooting in the next room and you wouldn't hear them. Okay, they also have the ability to hang a lighting grid. So you can hang lots of above lighting from above, makes it a lot easier. You don't have to move it around on the ground. Green screen studio here. This is where they shoot a lot of CGI shots. They shoot actors in front of the green screen. And then, of course, they swap out the green for the digitally created background or photograph background. So studio shoots offer a controlled environment where you have all the power, equipment, everything you need, and it's soundproof, and you don't have to worry about someone interrupting your shot or a plane going overhead. Okay. That's why films will try to shoot as many shots as they can on the studios. Most interiors are shot in a studio. They'll fake the interior of a building and shoot the exteriors outside on location. Here's an example. So you've got, this is obviously an RV for a road trip movie or something. And they're shooting the shots of the actors talking in the cab, the passenger and the driver, and they're going to, fake the backgrounds. They can do it much easier and more controlled in this environment. And they don't have to worry about the hassles of shooting on location. They'll do those shots later. Okay, sets can be built, lit, and returned to daily. So you get to the end of your shooting day, you're not done. You just say, okay, that's a wrap. Turn off the lights. Everything can stay. They probably put away the camera, but they don't have to touch it. On location, that's not true. They'll have to lock everything up, have security. Here you see a giant location shoot. They're very elaborate, therefore they're very expensive. You have a lot of people. They've even got trash and recycling set up here. Back here, the director is operating from here. He's watching what's on the camera there. And you have all these lights. This is a lot of work, a lot of time, and you only have the location for so many hours. But of course, no set can replace the authenticity of a real location. I mean, if you need a aircraft carrier for a movie, you're gonna need to go to an aircraft carrier. That's going to be hard to fake. So they do shoot on them and take advantage of all that great production value right there. So we divide location shoots into interiors and exteriors. So here we have a real dangerous shoot happening on a roof with cops and this character. Here we just have like an exterior establishing shot maybe. And then we also have interior shots, which they will do sometimes on location if they can't fake it in a set, or if the interior is so good, so particular that they need to shoot it. So here's an example of such an interior. They want all these details. This would be very expensive to replicate. So he said, oh, let's just shoot the scene here. Maybe they brought in the furniture, but they definitely brought in the light. All the light that you see here is faked. Okay, here we see the assistant camera measuring for focus from the camera. But let me show you how this light is fake. So daylight is faked on film set, even if it's sunny outside. Why? Consistency. The director wants the light to look the same in every single shot. So what do we know about the sun? It moves, it changes color as it gets lower. So if you're shooting in a single scene for 3 hours, the light at the beginning of the shoot is going to look different than the light at the end of the shoot. It's going to be kind of hard to cut those scenes together. So what they do is they put up diffusion, as you see here. They have a light that bangs in through the window. Sometimes they want less light or they want to block out the light. They'll put up a ND. This is called ND, or a blocking filter. And here's what it looks like. So they got the light outside the window, and bang, it comes banging in. You ever notice how light's always streaming in through windows in movies? Well, that's all faked, so that it's consistent. Here we see another example. Exterior shoots require a lot of planning to accomplish the goals in a finite amount of time. And so they'll have this whole street blocked off. They got light banging in here, and they're actually shooting inside, not outside. So back to exterior locations, great place to shoot. I mean, look at all this. I mean, you couldn't build this. You know, you put some people in costumes, you frame out the modern stuff, and all of a sudden we're back in time. But they do light sets. It's not just because it's an exterior doesn't mean you don't bring lights with you. Okay, here they're using a gigantic HMI to provide the lighting here for this scene. Okay. So here's an example. Here's natural light, all right, on this subject. Looks pretty good, but she's a little soft on the focus, not as defined. Boom, we added some film lighting. Look how much brighter and sharper the detail is. We can see a little bit more of her face. She's filled in. It just makes a more pleasant image. So the DP is not just trying to capture something realistically. Hey, this is a movie. This isn't a documentary. They're trying to capture something beautiful, augment with extra light. So here we see in the Hurt Locker, this is mostly an example of natural lighting, but because it's being shot outside in the desert, presumably. But look at this little cut right here. I don't think that's natural. So there's either a light or a bounce card that's used to bounce light on his face to make a slightly more interesting, more rounded chiaroscuro is the art term look. Natural lighting from the searchers, but even this shot outside in the west, they're still going to do some things to soften the light so that his face has a nice image. It doesn't have harsh shadows like the background. I'll show you that in a moment. So this is called a bounce card, and a bounce card is used on outdoor shoots, on location shoots, or on set, and it's a reflective material. The sun is here, it's lighting this side of the face, but it's also lighting the bounce card, and the light is bounced at a diminished amount back to the other side of the face, creating a perfect fill. Here's another example of it being used on location. Sun is clearly back there from the shadows, so it's lighting his back. That doesn't work, but we bounce the light off the bounce card, and it provides that light there. So take a look at this example. So this is from the TV show Entourage. And so you can see that it's a pretty bright day. Look at how bright it is. Look at the brightness on this woman's hair. But their faces are pretty nice. No, no bright washed out, a little bit here on the hair, but it's, pretty good. How'd they do this? Ta-da! This is called a 12 by 12 overhead. This is a giant scrim, essentially a diffusion. It's sort of softening the light, diminishing it a little bit, almost like not quite like an awning. And they've set that up, and the actors are walking underneath that. They might have had to set up 2 or 3 of them, so they have to walk a long way. So here's how it's used. It sort of diminishes the light. Light falls through, but it's softened. Okay, here we see it being done in a desert setting. And here you can see, here's without the scrim. Okay, much harsher shadows, much brighter. Here's with the scrim, softer. Softens the shadows, much more attractive. And that's why DPs will do it. Here we see filming in natural light. We see a bounce card being used to bounce light onto the front of the soldier. We see some diffusion, just soften the light coming in from above. Okay. And so they're just shooting this right here. All right. One more detailed example. We have a bounce card reflecting light. We have a scrim or a diffusion diffusing the light. And then we have a camera operator using a steady cam walking with the actor as they walk to carry the UPS box. Notice everybody's going to have to walk with the actor so that the light remains consistent through the shot being captured here. The camera isn't seeing everything we're seeing. It's just seeing this, which is perfectly lit. We also have night shoot exteriors. Night shoot exteriors are difficult, challenging, expensive. What you can see here is they've taken cranes. So the camera's somewhere here. This is what we're shooting. So, but they've taken all of these lights and so forth, and they put them up in the air to give them the desired effect. So here's what the shoot looks like. Here's what it looks like from behind the lights. Here's the effect. Here was the camera, and here these lights were creating this effect, banging through these trees. It looked like this on film, much more spooky than what you see. This is the craft of the DP. They know how to play and paint with light. So here's from, this is from Django. This is an outdoor scene there. They're obviously shooting on location, giant cranes. Look at that. That's not cheap to rent. Creating this overhead light, presumably moonlight. Notice the fan down here to create outdoor effects. Okay, so this is, yeah, shows you the extent they go to create movie magic, to make it look real. Also, everything in the frame looks beautiful and works. So here we'll talk about light qualities. Okay, so in other words, we've talked about direction, and now just, what are the qualities of the lights? We have hard light, looks kind of harsh on the face. We have hard light with a fill light, much better. We have soft light. Look at how different that looks from hard light, okay? And that can be achieved by diffusing the light, putting something in front of the lighting unit, which kind of breaks up the light. Here we have soft light with fill. Now that's the most pleasant, okay? That's the most photogenic of the photographs. So soft light can often mimic candlelight, and it's used in romantic films or period pieces. Here we see with Nicole Kidman. Soft light and focus can create a romantic image. Notice how everything in the background is very soft and out of focus. But also it can be used to highlight a main character. So here in Spider-Man, this is Mary Jane, who is the love interest of Spider-Man, played by Tobey Maguire. And they've lit Kirsten Dunst, the actress, really beautifully. He's in love with her. He's infatuated with her. So they want the audience to be as well. So she receives this very nice cinematic light to make her very pretty. So soft light versus hard light, generally soft light is more favorable, especially to female faces, and hard light we will see used more for male faces, particularly in crime or dealing with an antagonist. Here we see the example, this is hard light, creates harder shadows on the face. Here we have diffusion, just a single light. Here's what it looked like. Here's how they set it up. More flattering to the face. So diffusion is often used to soften the light. Diffusion in photography, very popular. Now note, you don't put the diffusion in front of the camera. You put the diffusion in front of the light. A hard light is more seen in crime films. This is a film noir. And then here's No Country for Old Men. We see a lot of hard light. It matches the theme better, this sort of harsh, dark and light in a crime film. Here's another crime film, Drive. And you see that all the light is coming in through the window. They've allowed his face to fall off into darkness here. So another thing to consider is exposure. With exposure, we're determining how much light we're letting into the camera. Okay, so most of the time you're going to correctly expose here, but you can underexpose. Let's say it's brighter day and you actually want a darker look. Well, maybe you'll underexpose, or maybe you overexpose to blow things out a little bit and give it a more magical or transformative look. And so depending on how much light you let into the camera will determine what the shot looks like. And DPs will generally, select the best exposure for the cinematic image that they're doing. So just wanted to show you some of the tools that are used by the grip unit. This is a light meter, which measures light. These are all the tapes and the tools and the grip equipment. We won't be quizzing on that. Just wanted to show that to you. So here's an example of overexposure. Okay, so the wedding photos are ruined because they're overexposed. Now here's underexposure used purposely. So, a lot of darkness here, but in this somber scene, it suits the mood and it suits the character. Overexposure being used, could be a death scene or a dream or some sort of psychedelic scene, and the light being shot in this way, overexposed, works for us. Here's several examples of overexposure where it looks very dreamy in summertime. Here it's being used in Lord of the Rings when Gandalf is reappearing. So all these are different techniques that the DP can use. And these are some of the tools. These are the many different lighting units. And you notice they go from very big down to very small, depending on what the scene calls for. How much light do you need to throw? Does it need to be focused? Now, we're not going to get too deep into these because this is a very detailed area and this is an intro course, but they vary in sizes. Note the barn doors on these things. You can flap this closed and block off part of the light, which is part of the shaping of light. So the electricians place light on set. They aim and focus the lights. That's their job. Okay. And here's an example of a light. And the grips come in and they use these things called flags. And some of them block light completely. Some of them diffuse light. Some of them even reflect light. So here we see an example. The electrician sets up the light, the grip sets up the flag. You have many different types of flags, and they're used to soften light, shape it, or completely block it. Basically put the light where the DP wants it and not where they don't. Here we see a set, grips placing the scrims, electrics placing lights, banging this light through a diffusion onto the truck, which is the subject of the shot. So here's an exterior shot, but look at all the lighting and equipment that's used to get the image that the DP wants. Here from The Power of the Dog, we see, a lot of darkness, which suits this sort of noir, gothic, Western movie. But they've put a little light here, probably a spotlight, to highlight his eye while he's, thinking about something. We can clearly see the figure, but they've also added this little boom interest light to give us something to look at. Here's another example of a spotlight. Notice the background, the gun out of focus. Only thing in focus, James Bond's face lit with one light that's spotting him out and highlighting his baby blues. So we can also gel lights. And when we gel lights, that changes the color. Here's different examples. The gels are just simply stuck on with something as simple as a clothespin. And the gelling lights change the color. I mean, here in this romantic, or maybe this is a fantasy film that's not terribly realistic, but in this scene, it works. And we see the DP using gelled lights. Gels can make a simple image much more interesting. I mean, there's nothing. This is a beautiful image. Notice he's, framed on the thirds, and the lighting is what makes it interesting, and the choice of color. Also, you will see foggers used. Now, this is used to add haze or fog or mist, whatever you want to call it. It can make a setting look old. It creates atmosphere. It softens the image, and it also calls attention to the lighting. And here we can see examples. We have, we start to see all these lights look a lot cooler in the fog, and it just adds a sense of mystery. This is from Blade Runner, which is a crime thriller. So it's a perfect type of lighting effect. It's not just weather, it sort of adds to the lighting. Here's what it looks like. You have the lighting unit, you fill the room with fog, and it creates mystery. It adds something to the scene. It allows the lighting to be seen. The fog gets lit up. Here we see from Macbeth, which is a historical piece. It really adds a sense of mystery. They're fighting this battle, and the fog fills in, and it actually can cover for not having a great set, because what's in the background falls out of focus and sort of into mist. Okay, now we're moving on to film developing. Okay. Now, when we're talking about film, which is still used, we have different types of film stock. Here you see different examples. Different film stocks will give you different looks. So the DP will pick the film stock he wants the film to have the look of. So how it's processed is really important. There's a lot of elaborate procedures I'm not going to go into, but you can process the film different ways to get different results. Film must be developed. How we process the film will determine the final look. Even if a movie is shot on film, it's still going to be edited on digital, and the final product is a digital file. But digital is much easier. So you create a digital file, and then you process it in something called color grading. It's already digital, makes it a lot easier. So this is a very elaborate process. I'm going to just get into a little touch of it. This is called color grading. Okay, so once the film is done, we've made the film. One of the final processes we go through is we actually go shot by shot and color grade the film, essentially adjusting the color shot by shot so scenes match and the overall tone of the film is conveyed. So here's an example from The Matrix. So originally they shot it looking like this. So they shot it normal, but when they went into the color grading process, they added this green tone. Okay, so you have raw and then you have final corrections. So at the very last process, they'll go in and tweak all the DP's work with the color processing, make sure shots match and make sure it has an overall aesthetic that they want. So here you see a scene with color processing and then without. So, color, we're starting to talk about color. It helps create a fantasy world. Here we see from Sweeney Todd, the blues. Warm hues are often used for period pieces. This is from Ma Rainey, and we see that sort of orange, luscious, warm hue that we often associate with the past. Here we see the bright yellows. I mean, this isn't any color correction. This is just the way they constructed the set, and the color conveys the romantic scene from Big Fish. So now we're moving on to a discussion of color and the psychology of color in film. We have the basic color wheel. I'm sure you guys know most of these if you've taken an art class. And we say that color conveys different emotions. You may not agree with all these, but some of these make a lot of sense. We typically use red for passion, danger, urgency. Often pink is used for compassion and tenderness, black for mystery, for power, evil, so on and so forth. And so, color often signifies emotion. We see red in particular used quite a bit to signify different things. Pink often used for femininity. Orange, warmth, sociability. Also death in the Italian tradition. Yellow, interesting, madness, sickness, obsession. Green can mean different things. It can signify nature, but also sickness. Blue can be passive or cerebral or morose. Purple can connote royalty or something ethereal. So, in a shot, colors are composed. Here, everything in the shot is basically yellow. And this is on purpose. He's got a yellow shirt, a yellow cart, a yellow wagon here. It's just, it's bright, it's happy. This is what Quentin Tarantino is trying to convey in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Here's another shot from Scott Pilgrim. The colors of the characters, we instantly know this girl is offbeat by her clothing and the color, which complements and matches well the background. That's not accidental. Everything is thought out in a film, including the colors of the background or the cups they're holding. So a color palette in a film, oftentimes a filmmaker would decide to work within a color palette. So a film will kind of have a certain tone to parts or all of the film. And then we call this a color palette. So here we have an example from Royal Tenenbaums. He shot everything in this sort of warm palette. Even the green on the bus was intentional. I'm sure that they would have painted over that or got a different bus if they wanted a different color. Here again, another film by Wes Anderson. He's very much known for his color palette and his production design. Everything's in these warm, sort of muted hues. These are analogous colors. How about an example from The Revenant? Everything kind of blue and cold. It takes place in winter. It's in the past. So it just sort of fits the mood and the narrative of the film. Here, Mad Max Fury Road, very bright, intense colors, but also dry and deserted. And often films will use colors for symbolism. Here from the film Pleasantville, the whole film shot in black and white, but they colorized certain figures in the film to sort of create this color discordance that adds to the narrative of the film. So color scheme is really important. Different ways that you create colors. So let's look at a few different examples. There's a few on the board, and this is done in ads. They're gonna do a color palette for an ad that's very pleasing to the eye. The eye likes certain combinations of colors. So here we see monochromatic from the Matrix. Everything's basically green. We have his flesh tones, but if you look closely, they're kind of all washed out in this green. This is all done in color grading. In the movie, this is called Traffic. They had some scenes that were blue, the political scenes, and the scenes in Mexico were all in this warm, sort of tropical color scheme. In the movie Amelie, they had very bright complementary colors. Things were red and green. Now, this isn't typical, but they did this on purpose to give the film this sort of magical, high contrast, very vibrant look. A bunch of different movies here where we see very complementary colors. This, I believe, is from Transformers. Sometimes you use this for a fantastic scene. It makes the eye pop and it has a very dynamic look. Okay, so symbolism, Luke blue, Vader red, evil and black. So, it's these are very simple uses of color. I mentioned oranges earlier. This is from the film The Godfather. Every time there's oranges in a shot, a death is going to happen. And I believe this was an intentional shot. I believe this is some sort of Sicilian tradition. And so they took the time to make sure oranges were in every shot to foreshadow that a death was coming, a little Easter egg for the audience. So we're wrapping up here. The 60-30-10 rule is another idea that you have one color dominates 60%, which in this case is this brown. The next color is 30%, and then you have a highlight, a little bang color at 10%. We see this really effectively used in It and also in Her, 60-30-10, just another color scheme. So now we're on to summation. So, lighting, we'll see high key lighting in TV sitcoms, or actually we have a contrast here. We have TV sitcoms and we have high key lighting. It's flattering, bright, not realistic. It's flat, not a lot of shadows, and the whole set is lit evenly. Now in cinematic lighting, where we see in most films, we'll see low key. There'll be quite a lot of depth. It's much more cinematic shot, and each shot is lit individually, okay? So the film crew, the electrician crew sets up lights, grips flag the lights. Light is shaped to create the best possible image. Every picture a painting, every frame a painting. Each shot is done this way. And of course, let's not forget the director of photography. There'll definitely be a question about what he does. He directs the grip and lighting crew as well as the camera crew. So we talked about different lighting schemes: 3-point lighting, key, fill, rim, low key lighting, that's a big one, high key lighting, backlighting, so on and so forth. On-set versus location lighting, that was discussed. We mentioned the crew, as I said before, talked about shaping with lights. We mentioned exposure and the notion of that we're going to shape with light and shadow. And then we moved on to color and talked about color conveying emotion, conveying character. We talked about color palette and color schemes. And then a little bit about color filming, color processing, and color grading. So that's gonna wrap our PowerPoint for today. Let me go back to my screen here and stop the share. So we covered a lot. I hope you guys followed that. You got a homework coming up on lighting. Reach out with any questions. That does it for today, and I hope you enjoyed it.